Printing from a home office or remote office location generates the most amount of phone calls and emails to system administrators. Let's take a look at how they connect and what's supported. In local printing, if you're printing from USB, it's usually pretty easy to do, provided you have the correct drivers. You may have driver issues that may be causing problems, such as not being able to print in color. If you VPN into your office or use work folders or sync data, you simply open the documents in Word or Excel or whatever program you're using on the local computer and hit the print button. There's a couple of ways to print documents through network printing. You can have a network Ethernet cable going to a networked printer in another part of your home office, or you could use VPN or remote desktop to print to a network printer in the corporate office while sitting in your home office. Wireless printing works the same way as Ethernet cable printing as far as the end user is concerned. However, it isn't usually that simple. There are several issues with the network going to sleep and wireless just being an unreliable medium for users. Many users are using remote desktop to remote into a server or a virtual desktop at the office, and they would like to print from that. There is some local printer support, so if the user wants to print using remote desktop or Citrix to their local printer, this is supported by Microsoft and Citrix. And this also goes for remoting into your workstation at the office. So if you're trying to remote in from your Windows 10 computer at home into the office computer that you normally would use, the same type of local printing using the client workstation is also supported. However, there are some unsupported scenarios as well. There is a requirement to have the correct print drivers for the client and the server in order to get remote desktop protocol to work. Network printing may work, but it's unsupported. So if you're trying to print to a network printer while connected with remote desktop or to a workstation at the office, this is not supported. However, it may work. It just is not supported if it does not. Only local printing is supported by Microsoft through a USB cable. Many users are now using cloud services, and they would like to print from those cloud services. There's many ways to print from cloud services depending on where the data is. If the data is in email, then printing to your local printer is the same as opening any other document and hitting print. If your data is synced to OneDrive or another cloud provider like Box or Dropbox, you either sync it to your local PC and open it up and print normally, or print from the web browser if open from the cloud. This may not always work, so you may need to download the file first before being able to print. And that's because not all web browsing fonts will translate to the local computer. If your data is exclusively held in the cloud, such as blob storage at Azure, then you may need to add a drive to your local PC and then open it as though it was local to your computer in order for it to print. This isn't a physical drive because the data is in the cloud. This is a logical drive. So for instance, if your data is up on Azure and you would like to print from your blob storage, then you can map that to, say, the G drive, and it'll show up as though it was local, and then you can print normally. Printing for a home user can be simple when loaded locally, or much more complicated when adding remote desktop, network, or wireless printing and cloud services. One of the things that your clients at home will be doing a lot of is using their printer, and usually it's a multi-function printer. One of the things they'll need to be doing with that printer is not just printing, but also going in and scanning after they've signed a document. So I want to open up the built-in product called Windows Fax and Scan. You can also use the product that comes with the multifunction printer as well, but I've found that in many cases it doesn't work as well because there's various different conflicts. It also puts a lot of bloatware on the computer that you may not want to have on there. And this already comes with the computer, so you don't have to add anything to it. So what we want to do is we want to choose the new scan option. You may see more than one scanner. In this case, it's because I have both an Ethernet connection as well as a USB. And in most cases, the Ethernet connection does not connect, but the USB does. It's now connecting to the USB scanner that's part of my multifunction printer. Now, if we're using a photo and we've got it on the glass, then what you see here will work out fine. What a lot of people don't realize is that if you're using a document rather than a photo, you need to click on the profile to change that. So when I click on documents, it changes from the glass to the feeder. Now, I may decide to have that document on the flatbed glass, so I'll just choose it back, or I can once again choose the feeder. And then here's another problem that a lot of people pick is they don't realize the paper size. And in most cases, it's going to be 8.5 by 11, but look at all those different options. So just scroll down to where it says 8.5 by 11, just make sure you pick the right one, and then you should be good to go. Now, under the color format, it's going to default to grayscale. So if you have a color document, make sure you choose the color option. Black and white is also an option that will work the same as grayscale. The difference may be that if you end up having multiple different shades of gray, it works better with grayscale than black and white. Black and white will end up being a higher contrast. And another issue that clients run into is the file type. They may not choose the right one. If it's a BMP, that tends to be very large. And if you choose JPG or PNG, those tend to be smaller. TIFF is the default. I recommend that you either use the PNG or the JPG for the smallest and most compressed file. Under resolution, if you need a high quality resolution, you can change it here. And you can see in my case, the highest it goes is 600. The higher the resolution, you're also going to have a larger file, and it's going to take longer to scan. So if you're just scanning a document, 200 is perfect. If you're scanning a photo, 300 is the minimum and 600 would make it the best. And brightness and contrast can help you if you're doing any type of preview. Now, you don't get a preview when you're just doing a document. You only get a preview if you're doing a photo. So if I change this profile here to photo, then my preview button lights up. I can click on preview, and now it's scanning. And here's my scan. It's not actually a photograph. It's more of a document, but we can make changes to the brightness as well as the contrast. And you won't notice that as much in a document, but you'll definitely notice it on a photo. Once you have everything set the way you want, you can go ahead and click scan, and it will scan it once again, and this time save it as a file. And where do you find that file? Well, it's going to be in Documents and then in another folder called Scanned Documents. And there's our image. So if I double click on it, and it shows up, in this case, it shows up in my Paint program, but whatever program is your default for viewing images, it will show up there. That is how we set up our multifunction scanner to scan documents and troubleshoot some of the more common options. Remote users and IT administrators have an awfully difficult time dealing with printers when the user is remote to the office. There are some ways that we can make this work, such as scripting through PowerShell, group policy, and others. Let's take a look at a couple things we can do. Once you're remote into their PC, you can go to / and the name of the print server. In my case, it's going to be DC1. And there's my two shared printers. One way I can connect is just right-click and choose Connect. And it'll connect to the printer. And now it'll show up when I go into Control Panel, Devices and Printers. And there's my Office One on DC1. So that's simple enough. Doesn't always work that way, unfortunately. So there's a way we can also do this through PowerShell. And we can get to PowerShell by going to right-click, choose PowerShell Admin. And we can type in add-printer-connection name. And capitals don't really matter in this case. I'm just typing it because it's easier to read that way. / the name of the server, and then the shared printer name. And hit Enter. Now it's going to go out to DC1, and it's going to connect. And as long as you don't see any error, you know that it worked fine. We can also go back to Control Panel and hit Refresh. And now we have both Office 1 and Office 2 on DC1. I'm now in the domain controller. Another way we can do this is through group policy. So assuming that the user is remoting into either a virtual desktop or using remote desktop into a session server, we can script a printer installation this way. We'll go to Tools and Server Manager and go down to where it says Print Management. And this is installed by default. You don't have to add this role. Here's our two printers. In order to deploy with group policy, all we have to do is right-click on one and choose Deploy with Group Policy. We'll browse to the GPO name, and we can create a new name, or we can go ahead and apply it to one that's already here. In this case, I'm just going to attach it to the default domain policy, so everybody gets this printer, but you may decide you want to do a specific one that only affects certain users. And now we have the option for applying this to users or computers. So if we apply it to users, it will work for that user no matter what computer they log into. If we apply it to computers, it will work for that computer no matter who logs into it. The only difference besides that is that if you apply a computer group policy, the computer has to be rebooted, whereas a user group policy you can apply using a command line gpupdate/force. I'll choose to do the per user and click Add, and we see now it's added into the default domain policy as per user, and now I'll apply it, and it says it was successful. Now I'm going to go back into the client, remove the two shared printers, and then push this out. It should show up with Office One. You can remove a printer simply by right-clicking and choosing Remove Device. And now both Office 1 and Office 2 have been deleted. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull up a command prompt, and I'll type gpupdate/force. And it's updating the policy, and it says it was successful. Now, if we want to see what policies were applied, we do a gp_result/r. And you'll need to do it as the administrator, otherwise you won't see all the different policies applied. So here we have gp_result/r and then everything that's applied underneath it. And there is our default domain policy, so we know that it was applied. So now we should see our Office 1 computer in the list of available printers. And there it is. Office 1 was automatically reinstalled using group policy. Adding printers to the GUI, PowerShell, or group policy are all great ways to resolve adding printers for users remotely. There are many different things that can go wrong with printing from a home office. Let's take a look at some of those, such as it won't print at all, and the fix for that may be to check the connection and swap out the cables if needed. Check print status that it shows up as green and ready. You could be printing to the wrong port. You may be trying to print to a network printer, but you need to be printing to a USB printer. Go ahead and change the port in the printer properties. You may be using the wrong print driver. If you're using the wrong print driver, in many cases, it won't print at all, or it will print garbage printing, which will be unreadable. It may not print in color. Well, you could be using the wrong print driver. For instance, you may have downloaded the black and white driver for a laser printer when what you wanted was an inkjet printer driver for color. It may not print to older operating systems, and I've come across this many times. And that could be because the Windows operating system, for example, may have gone to a newer version, but the manufacturer of the printer decided not to make a print driver for the older printer to get you to buy a new printer. If you're printing garbage letters, as mentioned earlier, you could be using the wrong print driver. And if you're printing letters that may be too large, then you can change the fonts and sizes in some of the printers themselves. That usually takes place in higher-end LaserJet printers, where you can go in and specify the type of font and the sizes that you'd like. It may not be an option in the smaller or less expensive printers. Color printing may not be accurate. In that case, you want to change out the ink cartridges or the laser cartridges. It may not print in remote desktop, and you need to make sure that you have the correct printer driver. It needs to be both on the server and the local printer and selected in the Client Resources tab. It has to be the default printer on the client, and Microsoft will only support it if it is a local printer connected to USB. If you can't print wirelessly, it could be that the wireless device on the printer has gone to sleep. So you need to change settings to always stay on. But even then, it may not always work. Wireless printing is notoriously difficult to get to work over the long haul. If printing is too slow, it may be because you're sending too much data to it at once. A user who works in an office and then goes to a home office may be used to sending off 20 or 30 color pages to a high-end printer. When they try to do that to a small home printer, then it may be too much for the memory that's in that printer. So you may need to send just a few pages at a time. You could be printing to the wrong paper. For instance, you're printing to letter and legal is coming out. Well, you just need to change the default printer settings in the printer properties of the printer, and that would be on the Windows or Macintosh operating systems. If you're getting poor quality, you can change to higher quality in the printer properties as well. By default, it may be set to low for you. And if the paper jams a lot, you may need to take the paper out, put the paper back in without being at an angle. On higher end printers, the rollers do wear out, and you may need to swap those rollers. On lower end printers, it may be too expensive to do this. It may be cheaper to replace the unit. Printing problems can be the biggest headache for home users and system administrators. You may want to send out a company-approved printer that you know will work with your applications, rather than trying to get the user's home printer to work properly. Let's look at some of the things that could go wrong with network printing. I'm in our print server, and it's called DC1 because it's also a domain controller, although it doesn't need to be. And in Server Managers, I'm going to Tools, and then I'm going to go to the Print Management option. And that's installed automatically. You don't need to add any roles or features to get that to happen. So what are all the different things that could go wrong with printing? Well, one of the things could be the drivers. If we look at our printers and we right-click and choose Properties, we can see under Advanced what driver it's using. So if it's not using the driver that you want, you can click the drop-down and see if it's a driver that has already been installed. And if it hasn't been, then just click on New Driver, click Next, and then select your driver from the list. But it also may be possible it's missing from there as well. When that's the case, you'll want to click on Have Disk and then Browse until you find the download with the file that you need. So how do we get that download? Well, we can go into a web browser, and I'll just go to HP because it is one of the more popular network printers, and we'll download and extract a print driver. I'll type in hp.com, and we'll click on Support and choose Software and Drivers. This menu changes often, so it's possible it may not look exactly the same as it did for me when you go to do it. You could also just go to support.hp.com. I'm going to click on Printer for the product, and I'll just type in HP LaserJet, and I'll just choose one from the list and click Submit. And now it wants to know the operating system, and it's detected that I'm using Windows 10, which in this case it's the Windows Server, but it's still the same kernel as Windows 10. And I can click on All Drivers, and I see there is a driver, product installation software, and basic drivers. And it includes a 7 megabyte file. I'll download that. Sometimes these files are much bigger than this, but in this case, it's only 7 megabytes. Now I'm going to go to my download folder and locate that file. And here's my file. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder and drop that in, because I don't need all 7 megabytes or hundreds of megabytes, whatever it is that the download size is. I've renamed the file laserjet.exe just so it's a little bit easier, and I'm going to double click on it and click Yes, and watch the files extract. So the files are extracting, and like I said, if you have several 100 MB file, it's going to take a little bit longer. But I don't need all of these files. I only need the files that are necessary for installing the print driver. So what I did was I left the license agreement just where it is, and I went into this path where you see here, C users, followed by the name of the user I'm logged in as, app data, and then local. And inside there, there's a temp directory, and this is where those files were extracted. So I'm going to double click on that, and there are the files. So all I really need from this is going to be the DLL file and the INF file. So I'm going to right click and copy on that, paste it in, and I'll do the same with the other file, or you can just drag it in. There we go. Now I'm going to cancel the installation. Now I can point to that location from my add drivers box. So I'll click on copy for the location, and then I'll paste it in here. And look at that. There's all the different print drivers that I need. I'll choose the one that I want, click next, and finish. This can save you a lot of bloatware on both the client PC as well as on the server. And I'll apply it. So now I have the correct print driver that I need, and it will automatically push out to the client as well, assuming that it's on the same kernel, in this case Windows 10, as I am. If it's going to be using Windows 7 or some older operating system, then you may not be able to use that for this printer. You may have to go in and choose a different printer, or you can choose a universal printer as well. It doesn't always work, but it may save you from having to buy a new printer. Let's take a look at a couple of other things that could go wrong with your remote users when it comes to printing. It could be on the wrong port. We see that this one is on LPT2. Well, most likely, if it's a network printer, it's probably going to be on a TCP/IP port. So make sure you select the correct port and apply that. Another issue is the printer could be offline. So if I right click and choose pause printing, we see it's paused here. So it will show up as a light gray icon to the client. And that means that the printer is not ready to go. So make sure that the queue status says ready. If it won't print in color, it's possible you have the wrong print driver. It could also be that it's just not capable of printing in color. So you want to see the color management tab if it has one. If it doesn't have one, it's for sure black and white. If it does have one, then you'll click on color management and take a look and see if it can print in color. And in this case, it cannot because I don't see any color options here. So it's just not capable in this particular case. If the print job gets stuck, it could be that you sent too much data to it, too many papers to be printed all at once. And if I right click and go back into properties again, and we go into sharing, you want to make sure that it's listed in the directory, so that way you can find it by name. And if the other drivers for older operating systems are available, you can click on additional drivers, and you can add them here. If the user's print job is not printing in the right order, in other words, everybody else's jobs are happening before theirs, it could be because they're using print priority. And if you see multiple different printer ports using different priorities, they might be using a priority that is not going to print the job right away because it's going to give other people the first shot at that. If you go to ports, you could also find a problem with printer pooling. Printer pooling is the opposite of print priority. Print priority has one printer, but it has many different types of people printing to it, such as CEOs, administrative assistants, HR, etc. Whereas the print pooling means you have many different printers, all the exact same model, and you're going to send a print job, but you don't know which printer is going to print to. So you need to make sure that you're aware of where those printers are. If the print jobs get jammed up, it could be that the rollers need to be replaced. This usually needs to happen about every 10 to 20,000 print jobs that go through it. And if there's streaks in the print job, it usually means that the scanner needs to be cleaned inside the printer, so you'll need to have that professionally cleaned. Some higher end printers also require a security code, so that way you can bill printing to various different departments. So if you don't have the correct code or don't even realize you need a code, then that could also cause print job problems for the user. Network printers and local printers have some of the same issues, but also very different ones because of the way they are connected as well as the higher end cost. Be sure to have a service maintain the printers to keep things working optimally. There are many different programs that provide various services for video conferencing. The lines are being blurred with advanced features that also make these software programs act like remote control tools, typically used by other programs like Remote Desktop or Quick Assist. The features continue to grow and merge over time. Conversely, remote control programs are now adding video conference features as well. Basic features for video conferencing include video and audio to allow groups to meet together. We've even seen the ability to blur backgrounds and have a green screen-like effect. Chatting allows for private or public chats and the ability to conduct a poll among other features. The moderator who controls the meeting can decide whether or not to allow chat and these additional features. Screen sharing is a great feature to let someone present during a meeting. They can show their desktop or a specific program. And breakout rooms allow small groups to discuss separate issues and then come back to the main group to present those ideas. Some of the advanced features are available on certain programs, such as Microsoft Teams, and they include file sharing and copy and paste. This allows you to copy data from your computer and paste it into the chat for others to use and access that data. Remote control can assist in a support scenario where the presenter allows another user to go in and make changes to their computer, and system administrators may use this a lot to help their home users. Email connectivity is a feature where you can email the team from the program as well as integrate email into the application. Team members can send and receive email from the application itself. Secure Groups allows for separating people into main and subgroups for privacy. The ability to grab files from OneDrive or Google Drive and place them into the chat is a nice feature for file sharing. It allows users to link their data accounts so others can see whatever else is in the cloud folders desired. Although there are some great features and advanced features, there's also some large headaches waiting for us as administrators. So many things can go wrong, so it's important to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the programs you'll use to get your users to be as productive as possible. Zoom is a web conferencing program that's used a lot by schools and some businesses, and there's some issues that can come up with Zoom, such as security. So let's first take a look at the schedule a meeting options. When I click on schedule a meeting, we want to make sure that the security settings are ready to go. So I scroll down, I choose the date and the time, and I can choose whether or not it's a recurring meeting. So if it happens every Monday at 9 a.m., for instance, you can do that. Then we have the registration required. So if you check that box, then it adds an additional component where you need to register by getting an email, registering, and then you'll be able to join the meeting when the meeting starts. We also have the option for a passcode, which now is the default. In times past, this was an option that you could check. And you could have people just go into a waiting room instead of going right into the meeting if you're not ready to start that meeting. For video, you can choose to have the host and participant video on or off. It's a good idea to have that off until the meeting starts. Otherwise, some people might be caught off guard. And then you have the option for audio. So you can either do telephone, computer audio, or both. By default, it is set for both. For enable join before host, you can uncheck that to keep users from talking and doing other things before you join, just to make sure that you're moderating everything properly. And if anyone comes in and tries to Zoom bomb your class, then you can keep that from happening by making sure nobody joins before you. We can also add alternative hosts. And what alternative hosts do is it allows them to share their screen and do other things that only the host otherwise would be able to do. We could join a meeting if there's a meeting in progress, but we'd have to know what that ID was. And then we can choose to host a meeting. So I'm going to choose to host a meeting with my video on because I'm actually ready to start the meeting. So that's okay. And I can choose to join with computer audio, or I can choose with the phone call. So if I'm going to be calling in my meeting, then I don't really need to have the computer audio working. But in this case, you can see I've got my speaker, everything ready to go, my microphone. So I'm going to click on join with computer audio. It's also a good idea to click on test speaker and microphone just to make sure that you can hear and it can hear you. And you can see both of those are working. So I'm going to go ahead and maximize that and click on participants. The participants screen gives me a screen that I can resize, I can move around, I can even change to a different monitor if I have multiple monitors. And when other users are here, then I'll be able to see them, also be able to control various different things about them, such as I can mute them if I need to. If users are going to have an issue, it's going to have to do with the video or audio in the lower left-hand corner. So if I click on the arrow next to where it says stop audio, then you can see that if I've got more than one webcam as I do, this is not the webcam I want to show. I want to show this webcam. And then I also have options under video settings that can also make a big difference, such as I can turn on or off HD. So if I uncheck HD, we can see that the picture doesn't look the same as it did with HD checked. And I have some other options here as well. Under audio, I can click on audio and we can make sure that once again, we're using the right speaker and the right microphone. So even though the meeting's already started, I can still go in and make those changes if I need to. And I can change my input level as well if I end up sounding too loud or too soft. Another nice feature is I can go in and record, and this is the location for my local recordings. You can also choose to record to the cloud as well. I'm going to close all this, and the next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an invite. I'm going to invite someone into my meeting, and then we'll go ahead and let them join. If I go down to participants and click the up arrow and choose invite, I can choose many different ways to invite. I'm going to choose email, and I'll choose to use my Gmail account. And here's what the invite looks like. And I can go ahead and type in the recipient names and invite them. And you can see all this different meeting information. The most important part of this meeting invite is going to be this line right here. This is the actual link to the Zoom meeting. Now, if they don't have Zoom installed, it will prompt them to install it at that time. If they do have it, it'll just go ahead and launch the meeting. And we see our invitation has come through, and the person that we wanted to have join the meeting is here. Hello. And once again, you may want to check the audio and video settings in case the person cannot hear or see you. Let's click on the chat icon, and that will allow us to talk to each other. So I'm going to type in hello there, and she's going to type in something back. And now we see that. Now we can see that this is public. One of the things that you'll want to make sure is that if you're going to type something public, to know ahead of time that everyone is going to see it, because we can also click the drop down and choose a private message. And I'll type in just for you, hit enter, and you can see it says privately. So that way we know it's only going to the person that you sent it to rather than to everyone. We can also do things such as attach a file if we'd like, and we can choose for everyone. We can choose the host, no one, that kind of thing. I'm going to close this box, and we can also choose to record. So if I click on record, we have the option for cloud or computer. Now this is important because a lot of times there is a charge for choosing the cloud if you go over a certain amount of data. Otherwise, if you choose to record on this computer, then it will record only on the computer, and then you can upload that to another location or save it to YouTube, wherever it is that you'd like it to go. Another issue that comes down to security would be the allowing participants to do things such as share their screen, chat amongst themselves, rename themselves, and unmute themselves. So if you're having a problem with Zoom bombers, then you can remove some of these things, especially the ability for them to unmute themselves. I'm going to share my screen now, and I have the option when I click the up arrow to choose one participant can share at a time or multiple participants. I'm going to click on share, and we see the option to also allow you to share screens or individual applications. So I've got some individual applications I could share, or I could share an entire screen. Now you see, I have 3 different screens. So if I share one particular screen, it's going to share every application that may be launched on the computer. If I share just an individual application, then they're only going to be able to see just the application that I share. I'm going to choose this Word document to share. And now you should be able to see the Word document. It says hello. So you can see that. Go ahead and nod. Okay, great. And to stop sharing, all I have to do is click on the stop share option, and we go back to our video. There's also a way that I can not only share my screen, but allow the other users to control that screen. So you can do remote sessions, and that works both ways. Zoom is a versatile conferencing program that can also be used for sharing and remote control to host meetings or to troubleshoot a problem. Microsoft Teams is a very popular web conferencing application. And one of the things that we can do is we can make calls using both video. We can also make calls using audio only. So there's a lot of different things that can go wrong with a Microsoft Teams call. Let's start out by making a call. I'll click on calls, and we can type in the name of the user. Now, if you don't get a response after typing in the name of the user, it's possible they don't have a license for Microsoft Teams. So for instance, if I type in Chris and I don't see Chris's name just pop right up, I can type in the entire email address, and then we should be able to see the option to make a call. Now, if we just click on the left-hand side, we're going to get audio call only, but on the right-hand side, we get to also make a video call. So I'm going to call Chris now, and then Chris is going to answer, and you see my video in the lower right corner. Now, Chris has answered the call, but I don't see Chris's camera. So Chris, why don't you go ahead and click on the picture of the camera and make sure that it doesn't have a line through it, and your video should turn on, and there you are. Very good. So here is our video call. She can see me, I can see her. However, if you can't see each other, then many times it's because of device settings. So if I click on device settings on the right-hand side, you want to make sure that the audio device, the speaker, the microphone, all of these are the ones that you want. So if you can't hear, you can't see, then choose the drop down and choose the one that you want. Now I have a lot of different speakers here. You may only see 1 or 2, as well as microphones. Also under the camera, if you have more than one camera, then you may end up getting the wrong view of the camera as well. So you want to make sure that you've got the right camera. You can see it switched to a different camera, which was not pointing at me, and now it is pointing at me. There's a few other great features we can do, such as we can hold the call, and we can see that we're on hold. So that way we can make another call while we're waiting, and then click resume when we're ready to start up again. And if we hit the drop down again, we have the option to transfer the call to another user, and we can even apply background effects as well. One of the other options we can turn on is live captions. So I'll click on live captions, and this is a one-way. You'll actually need to turn this on both sides if you want both users to be able to see this. And you can see my live captions coming through. Now, it won't always be accurate, but for the most part, it will be. I'm going to turn off live captions. And I also have the option to record our phone call as well. And it says here, we're now recording, and I'll go ahead and choose dismiss. And now I'm going to click stop recording, and we'll click stop. I'm going to choose to end the call. So it was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm going to choose to click the leave button. And now the call is ended, but now we're going to click on chat. In the upper left-hand corner, we see the option to chat. And I've highlighted Chris's name, so anything I type will go right to Chris. So I typed hello again, and now let's see what Chris's response is going to be. And Chris has responded, nice to see you. So we don't have to just have audio or video calls. We can also have a chat as well. Even though we're done with the video call, we can still go into device settings by clicking on the icon in the upper right-hand corner with our initials, and then click on settings. And there's many more settings that we can have besides just devices. We've got general settings, we've got privacy, notifications, and many others. The most common issues you'll have with Microsoft Teams is going to be the speaker, the microphone, and the video calls. Besides that, once you make the call, you can also have issues with jitter, and that could come in with video, it could happen with audio, and typically that happens because of a wireless connection. So you may want to consider moving to a wired connection so that way you have better speed and better quality in your call. Teams is also available in mobile devices, and if you're not getting good quality with your cellular connection, then you can switch over to Wi-Fi and see if you get better connectivity that way, and vice versa in case Wi-Fi is not up to speed. Another interesting option is to click on Make a Test Call, and what that'll do is it'll call yourself, and it'll tell you whether or not your audio, your video, and anything else that you're using is working properly. And that's a good idea before you jump into a call, just to make sure that you're not having any issues with your hardware choosing the wrong device before you make a call. Of all video conferencing programs, Teams has the most integration with Microsoft products and security. Products such as Microsoft Exchange and other apps can also be added into Microsoft Teams, such as calendaring and email. It can also cost more depending on which licenses you choose to activate. There are additional features that you can get that do end up costing more. One thing that IT administrators are most worried about is having the remote user get hacked. So what can hackers do? Well, they can steal or encrypt your data. If they steal the data, obviously it could be posted online elsewhere or used against the company. If they encrypt the data, then the data is useless. Although it's still there, you have to pay a ransom to potentially get it back. They could steal the identity of the person and open up credit cards and other things that could end up ruining the person's credit. They could attempt to reach corporate data assets. If the user is logged in through remote desktop or through VPN, then they gain access to the desktop of the remote user, then they could potentially get access to the data assets of the corporation. And they can spy on the users through audio and video. Now, this not only is a privacy issue, but this is also a legal issue for the corporation. If you have a company-issued laptop, for instance, that somehow gets breached, and then the user has their audio or video stolen and posted online, then it could leave the corporation liable for damages. So what can we do to protect our users? Well, we can make sure we have the latest updates, because that's going to make sure we have the best security patches applied. And we need to make sure the users have an internet firewall. So some internet service providers provide a firewall and some don't. And you want to make sure that the user does have a firewall. And also the firewall needs to be turned on the operating system. All modern operating systems have a software firewall. You want to make sure that it's turned on. And if you have an anti-malware program that uses the software firewall, just make sure it's turned on there as well. And you can turn on the anti-crypto feature in Windows 10. So that way you have much less of a chance of having your files cryptoed and then made unusable. And you want to have a good, sophisticated anti-malware, not one that's necessarily free. The one that comes with Windows, which is Windows Defender, is not a bad one, but there are better ones that do cost an additional fee. And you want to block access to applications. Some applications are detrimental to the corporation. It could be an issue with social networking. It could be an issue with corrupt or infected files that come from applications. So you can approve which applications the user can have on their computer. And that can be done using System Center. It can also be done using Intune as well as other programs. We want to also filter web searches and web browsing. And you can do this through some anti-malware products. You can also do it using third-party products, such as ones from SonicWall, Cisco, and others. And this can keep explicit web searches away as well as potentially infected pages. Anti-spam filter for email is very important. You want to make sure that you have a good one. Now, if you're using Microsoft 365 or Office 365, also known as that, then there's already a spam filter built in, but it's not necessarily going to filter out everything. So a good anti-malware will also have a good spam filter in it, but you could also get an additional spam filter to check on your email done by a third party. And you want to consider Intune for mobile and PCs because then you can manage what applications they can use, what web browsing they can do, and you can separate work from personal use of mobile devices. So that way, if the user brings their own device, you can split that data between personal and corporate and never have them commingle, which could cause issues with privacy and other data security. I'm in a Windows 10 computer, and I'm going to go to Start and Settings, and we'll go to Update and Security. And I'll click on Windows Security, and here's all the information about security with the computer that comes built in with Windows, such as we see virus and threat protection, which brings up Windows Defender. And we see there's no current threats. We could also turn on the protection settings for automatic submission, and that would send a sample off to Microsoft, although that could be a data security issue with the corporation. Then we also have the option for virus and threat protection updates. We see right now we're up to date. If it's not, you can click on Check for Updates. And then there's Ransomware Protection. I'm going to click on Manage Ransomware Protection. You can choose to block history. And if we click on filters, we can see what that means. We can clear the filters of any previous viruses. We can quarantine items, clean items, block actions, etc. Let's go back. We can choose protected folders. So we can add a protected folder that cannot be encrypted. So if we have a folder we'd like to protect, you can click on Add a Protected Folder, click on the location. I'll just choose the test folder, and now it's protected. Then we have Allow an app through controlled folder access. So if I click on that, we can choose to allow an app from recently blocked apps or browse all apps and choose to allow it. And if we are really concerned about a ransomware issue, then we can have our files synchronized with OneDrive. So we can click Set up OneDrive, and then it will synchronize our data from our local computer up to OneDrive, which we can then use in case we have a ransomware attack. Under Firewall and Network Protection, you want to make sure that the firewall is turned on for all different types of profiles. And under Device Security, you want to make sure that Secure Boot is turned on, which it currently is, and that keeps any viruses from loading pre-operating system load. Keeping users from being compromised is more important than learning what to do afterwards, because you can make it so it never happens in the first place. The biggest problem in troubleshooting would be what to do when a virus or other malware breaks out. I've sold a lot of different products over the years, and I believe there's many great products, but they all have their advantages and disadvantages. There's many free or very cheap products that are pretty good out there, but I don't believe they're as good as the paid options. And that's because the paid software has zero-day exploit coverage, just in case there's no antivirus signature that can protect your user against a new type of malware. Many products are marketed as antivirus instead of anti-malware. So what is the difference between these two products? Well, it's mostly in the marketing. Antivirus was a term that we all used in the 1990s when this was new. Spyware, worms, and others had not yet existed. So researchers decided to add a new umbrella term to cover any other software besides a virus, such as a worm or spyware and others, and called it malicious software or malware. Windows Defender does come with the Windows 10 operating system, and it basically started out as an anti-spyware product many years ago, so you still needed an anti-malware program as well. It doesn't do as good of a job with zero-day exploits as the paid products, but it does a good job with signature-based anti-malware solutions. With antivirus, malware writers go to great lengths to create malware that's going to avoid detection on your computer and resist you from being able to remove it. Today's products typically combine signature-based scanning with heuristics technology and global-based global threat intelligence to recognize and root out malware on systems and prevent infections in the first place. Spyware is a malicious infection that's a little bit easier to pick up than most viruses. Its major threat is against your data and your identity from being stolen. It also will attempt to try to sell you everything through web browser extensions, as well as pop-ups that can happen in the operating system. Data loss prevention aims to protect data that leaves the security of the internal business network, whether it's through email messages, USB drives, on a laptop or mobile device, and it allows you to protect that information from ever leaving the company or ever leaving to go to the internet. And you can install data loss prevention products onto your server, push them out to your client, as well as using Intune or using Microsoft 365. You'll want to make sure you have an integrated firewall. Although a network should always have firewall protection, something like a Cisco ASA or a checkpoint firewall, a firewall on the operating system will protect you from the inside as well as if any of the devices such as laptops leave the office. You'll want to have device control as well, because malware can also infect a computer not connected to a network or the internet. Connecting a USB device to a computer or installing software from a DVD or other file always runs the risk of transferring an infected application to the machine. You'll want to have email protection. Anti-malware suites many times come with email protection, spam filtering, that kind of thing. If you don't have that, you'll want to make sure that you have spam filtering built into your firewall or into your email server. And of course, you're going to want support with whatever product that you purchase. So make sure that you purchase the support if you need to, or that it comes with the support, and what kind of escalation they have in case you have an issue. Website browsing is also very important. Once again, a good anti-malware suite will come with website browsing protection. Encryption tools are included in some anti-malware suites, and you can use them to encrypt data as well as decrypt the data. Endpoint protection and response tools use agents on the endpoints to monitor network events occurring at those endpoints. And then they report that to a central database. You'll want to have a product that has a central database that you can go to, and you can see the health of all your computers all at once. And you'll want to have a good firewall in that anti-malware as well. Make sure it has easy controls for being able to open and close ports as needed. What happens if you do have an outbreak? A virus or some other piece of malware gets into your system somehow? Well, the first step you want to take is to discuss the situation with your boss and department heads. Even though you know you're going to want to disconnect and unplug things, you can't do that without someone's approval. So make sure you ask them right away if it's okay to shut down the servers or unplug the network, and you can explain why that is, why it's important. You'll also want to inform everyone in the company of the outbreak and the severity, and you can usually do this through the department heads if it's a very large corporation. It's much easier than the IT department running around and telling everyone. Then you're going to want to unplug the network switches for the entire company, and that's because some types of malware will work their way through the system, such as a worm. And those worms really can only be shut down by disconnecting all of the different network plugs going into the switches or just unplugging the switches. After that, you can shut down all the PCs and servers. It can't replicate to other computers if the network switches are unplugged or the cables are pulled out. So that's why you want to unplug those first before shutting them all down. The next step is going to be to use an isolated PC to send a sample file to the AV company. If it got through your anti-malware program, it means that there's no signature file to delete that virus. So you're going to want to isolate a PC and send a sample file off to them. And you're going to want to apply a new antivirus patch once they send you an antivirus signature to go with it. And of course, at the very end, once this is all done, you want to document the incident and the resolution, so the next time this happens in the future, you can get through it much more quickly. And you'll also be called into various different meetings to explain exactly what happened, what you did, and in what order. Knowing the anti-malware product to buy for your company is important. Look for all the features you need to keep out or resolve an outbreak. Knowing the steps to handle an outbreak may be the difference from the company staying in business or being brought down by malware. Windows servers and clients can all be susceptible to phishing attacks because an email that attempts to phish for a user to download their malware can infect every system in a network. A hacker sends out an email to phish for a byte, and once they get one, they try to reel them in using several different techniques. The hacker may then gain control and steal, delete, encrypt, or hold for ransom any data that they find. So how do they do it? Well, they start by embedding a link in an email. That's a very popular way of phishing. And embedding a link in an email will redirect your employee to an unsecured website that requests sensitive information, which we will then enter thinking it's a legitimate site, such as a banking site. You can also get it through viruses attached to an email. Installing a Trojan via malicious email attachment or ad allows the intruder to exploit loopholes and obtain sensitive information. You can also do it using spoofing. So they can spoof the sender address in an email to appear as though it's coming from a reputable source. And they can attempt to obtain company information over the phone by impersonating a known company vendor or IT department. Many people have clicked on ads and websites that can lead to an infected site where they're going to attempt to push fake antivirus or other software to your computer. And companies fall prey to phishing attacks because of naive internet browsing on many users. Instituting a policy that prevents certain websites from being accessed can reduce the business's chance of having their security compromised. And some browser add-ons and extensions have been known to be infected and cause data to be stolen. Users shouldn't use these at all, or at least use only ones that can be trusted. And mobile apps that are connected to the company network can be a big threat to Windows servers. Blocking them from use in Microsoft 365 or Exchange policies can help protect the network. There's lots of different ways that we can protect against a phishing attack, such as educating our employees. We can conduct training sessions with mock phishing scenarios. We can deploy a spam filter that detects viruses. We can keep all systems current with the latest security patches and updates, and install an antivirus solution, schedule signature updates, and monitor the antivirus status of all of our equipment. We can develop a security policy that includes but isn't limited to password expiration as well as complexity. Of course, we can have a web filter to block those malicious sites as well as sites that the company just doesn't want people to go to. And we can encrypt all sensitive company information just in case someone does get access to a file, they won't be able to open it. And we want to convert our HTML email into text-only email messages, or just disable HTML email messages altogether because they can have links that will take us to sites that we don't know. And we can require encryption employees that are telecommuting. Don't forget to test your staff to make sure that they're not clicking on fake messages, and to always stay vigilant. Troubleshooting phishing can be a difficult thing. The best thing to do is to try to keep it from happening by good employee training and the best security practices.